And I think just agreeing with what you're saying from entrepreneurs is when you start out, you definitely start with a goal, right? You have this in research, you call it hypothesis. So you have this assumption that you've started with. You're like, if I did A, B, and C, it will lead to D. Then you set out to do that. But of course, as you set out to do that, what you're essentially doing is trying to validate if your assumption is true or not.
I think sometimes we human beings get lost in the details, and sometimes it's good to step back and see how my tribe works within the rest of the tribes, the rest of the human tribes. Meaning to say how my country story or my city story also works in some other contexts. And that can help maybe people have a global vision, but stemming from something local. So for me as a filmmaker, it's a challenge to reduce a half an hour story to 30 seconds or to maybe less than a minute to meet social media requirements.
Yeah.
I think it can be done,
Okay.
and it could be really great for, and we've done it, great for to get people hooked onto the story, maybe to serialize it. I think probably serialize
Hello, good people. Again, I welcome you to another episode where we speak to ecosystem enablers of entrepreneurship in Africa. We've spoken to investors, we've spoken to founders, we've spoken to researchers, and today we are more than honored to be speaking to a storyteller. Of course, you'll get to hear more from him on what kind of storytelling he does and why he is in Kenya. But before we get there, let's just get a round of introductions. Again, I'm your co-host, Eliud Luther, the founder of Innobid and the co-host of this particular podcast. And today we have Armando. Armando, tell us who you are, just a brief introduction, and of course, the work you do as well, and maybe why are you in Kenya now?
Of course. Thank you for having me. My name is Armando Guerra. I'm a Cuban-Spanish filmmaker. I specialized in documentary. So I've been doing documentaries making documentaries for the last 20-some years. And I'm based between Valencia, Spain, and Copenhagen, Denmark. And I'm here, of course, making a documentary. I travel the world looking for stories. I try to tell stories from a more global perspective. I look for more global trends, but through local stories. So I'm here looking for a couple of stories, developing finding the characters, working with them, trying to understand their story and where they want to go, and what that means for global trends. So I came to do a story on AI, and also another story on food, and so basically these are very local stories, but they have ripple effects globally. They reflect some of the trends in the world. Yes, that's basically why I'm here.
Thank you. And thank you for, of course, gracing us. And I know you've been in Africa before, specifically in East Africa. I think you've also shot another story in Uganda, and now you're in Kenya. I feel like you're getting that connection with the people and the continent.
Yes.
But I'm just curious because I think from your introduction you mentioned, of course, you're Cuban, Spanish, living in Denmark, and probably also Valencia, Spain, and all that. But then why Africa? And also, there's something about, especially when you've lived in this continent long enough, that you always see things a certain way. And out of curiosity, I just want to know, you've come in, of course, and you've shot a few stories. Is there something you've seen that looks sort of different, unexpected, and sometimes you're like probably locals sometimes miss this, but from your global perspective, you could probably sort of deduce something different from it.
Well, that's a big responsibility.
No pressure.
Yes. No, I came. I came to Africa many years ago for the first time to Kinshasa, Congo, and I was awfully unprepared. I read a couple of books, but nothing could prepare me to Kinshasa or life in Congo. That was more than probably 10 or 12 years ago. And then after that, I took a big gap from Africa because some of the stories led me to Haiti, to Latin America, to Asia, to Europe, of course, to North America as well. And then, but after 2019, after COVID, I some of the topics that I was touching on the films were lacking the African element. So that where was that African voice? And so I decided that as long as I could, then I would try to find stories that could reflect the topics that I was touching on. So, for example, last year I was doing a story on secondhand clothes, and secondhand clothes, of course, are a lifeline for Africans right now. And so I wanted to do a story on this waste colonialism, the way the West processes textile waste, which is basically what people dump in the special textile dumpsters in Europe, and then they're classified and they're sent to Eastern Europe for further classification. Some of the best stuff stays in Europe, and then the rest is sent to Asia, to Africa, to the Middle East, and is sold here. But then the end of life of those textiles, those garments, just ends here, where there are no or very limited environmental provisions. So last year I went to Uganda to tell that story. I would have come here and Kenya, because Kenya has one of the biggest second-hand markets. So I think because I tell more global stories, I try to look for these very specific local stories in places like Africa or in Latin America. But I'm not an expert in these countries. I do rely, I try to read a lot and research, but nothing makes me a person that has lived here. And that probably the only difference is this massive local knowledge that a person that lives here can have. Maybe I can help with maybe my more global knowledge. So where does this piece of this puzzle fit within a global story, within a trend? So this trend in textiles in the world, we can use a local story to tell that bigger story. And I think sometimes we human beings get lost in the details, and sometimes it's good to step back and see how my tribe works within the rest of the tribes, the rest of the human tribes. Meaning to say how my country story or my city story also works in some other contexts. And that can help maybe people have a global vision, but stemming from something local. In other words, for example, somebody who's running a company here, solving very specific needs, may profit from looking at other companies doing maybe not the same, but something differently. But nobody can beat somebody with a local knowledge, because that person is the one that knows the market, the target groups, how to tell that story, the story of his or her enterprise or her project. So I don't think I have that deeper insight into concrete African countries. In fact, I caught myself buying a book the other day at a local bookstore, and it's just I'm devouring it right now, and I'm thinking, Oh gosh, I wish I had read this book before coming here. It has nothing to do with Kenya.
Yeah.
It's a book on like Ethiopia and Sudan.
Okay.
But those stories affect Kenyans because people end up coming here. You have a very powerful influences when different people from all over the world come to a place. So I don't know if I have that deeper insight into Africa.
I actually feel like what you've shared is an insight in itself because I think locally we usually say you build local as you think global because when you start building, of course, it always starts with there's a community around you that has inspired you. And that's why when you look at stories of most African founders, they will tell you it's either their own personal story or a story of someone next to them within their surrounding, within their community. But of course, when you build this, you need to be aware, just like you said, it's a connected ecosystem. The globe today is so connected that sooner or later, someone in Spain, someone in Denmark will actually interact with your solution. And you need to be able to think how they will perceive it. I think that's, and I feel like that's where the opportunity lies, right? That when we bring these two worlds together, a global view and this local knowledge, like you call it, of people really building and obsessed with the problem and the solution, trying to bring it to life. I think when these two worlds come together, something really magical happens. And I think on this, I think I've interacted with enough founders and they will tell you, they're always looking at it from a point of opportunity. Like what opportunity lies at that intersection of when the global view and this local building comes together. And I think for me, I feel like storytelling plays a key part of that, driving that opportunity. And maybe, of course, most of our listeners will be founders. What would you say is that opportunity that lies between, I think, that intersection of the two worlds when they come together, and probably if they become more intentional, what can they actually unlock from that?
Right.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that, and I actually live between two worlds. I also run my own company.
Yes.
So I think running a company, you have to have clear objectives, and so you can really focus on achieving the goals you want. But you need to have clear objectives, and those clear objectives could be your story as an entrepreneur or as a business person. I'm perhaps not the best person to talk about business because I don't think I'm a great businessman, but I do have things clear, and
think that was
try
that, yeah.
and I try not to be tantalized with this other project, this and that. I know what works for us for the company. We have our workflows, and we're of course very open to modify things in order to achieve an objective, which is basically completing a film or securing a contract, etc. Now, as a filmmaker, I actually live in a whole different world because I come with, I do my research, I do all the pre-production, and I go to a country, but then the story actually unfolds in so many different ways, and I usually feel like I know nothing, and I've prepared I haven't prepared enough, and so whereas with the company I have a very narrow margin of error to work within what I want. With storytelling, with the documentaries, I am actually very open to where the story might go, but I keep the central idea that I came to shoot always in my mind, because we call in filmmaking we call the main story. That's your main story, and then you sort of embellish it with different sub stories, and then we create something that we call color, when you can feel a place, either visually, sound wise, and a mix of both, right? And so those are sub stories that can help tell a bigger story. you sort of like feel like you deviate and then you come back to it. So I think from an entrepreneurial perspective, I think without being an expert that you need to have your ideas straight, and you need to know where you want to go and stick to it for a while, but also keep an mind open for the opportunities that you may discover that may transform your life. Storytelling um, is the DNA of who we are as human beings. This is where we come together as a species. This is how we come together as a ethnic group, as a nation. We have this. We believe some stories, and that's how a society works. Now, from a company perspective, you have having your objectives very clear. It's your own story. This is the story that I want to pursue. But also, if you sell a product, you also need to tell the story of your company to the customer. So that's another. Maybe they're very related, but that's maybe a more people's friendly storytelling that you need to come up with as your, because that's, you want to sell a product, you need that so you can keep going. Sometimes these two stories are not so different, but sometimes you don't you don't I'm not talking about like bigger, like really big companies. You don't reveal that there is these investors that are pushing you to pump more useless, cheap phones into the market because that's already flooded with. But you have investors that say, hey, you need to keep selling. So maybe that's not the best environmental story, but you need to keep pushing your products, right?
That's true.
So yeah, that's my take on that.
Yeah, no, that's so good, because I think one thing I've picked from, and I think just agreeing with what you're saying from entrepreneurs, is when you start out, you definitely start with a goal, right? You have this, in research you call it hypothesis. So you have this assumption that you've started with. You're like, if I did A, B, and C, it will lead to D. Then you set out to do that. But of course, as you set out to do that, what you're essentially doing is trying to validate if your assumption is true or not. And that calls for a level of flexibility. And I think in research, you usually say you also just follow the insights. So you go out with these research questions, you'll be asking, then you realize most of your respondents are answering a certain way. So you definitely want to probe deeper and try to understand, because that's the sweet spot where innovation lies. And so you set out with the idea, but I think don't be too, and I think the point you're making, don't be too obsessed with it has to be a certain way. But maybe you are wrong while you are coming up with the rubric of the questions, and so maybe it's time for you to say, maybe this is the real story, right? This new story. Yeah.
Yes, I'm following this company in the U.S. This is a guy who worked out of Technicolor, and he went to another company called Frame.io, and so he came up with he wanted to go his own way, and he created a company, and he wanted for filmmakers to be able to film while directly uploading onto the cloud. And for us, it's actually really cool because we've been doing that recently in Europe and in places where with like really solid internet connection, and that allows you to, once you finish your day, your editor back home it already has everything. So there's no need to physically. So this guy started a company that started doing that. And but then while he was doing that, he realized that was not where the money was, because it's you go back to storage needs on the cloud. It's still very expensive. It's very expensive for us. It's very expensive, imagine, in the global south. So he realized that with his technology, he could basically create a bridge between one person in one side of the world and one person on the other side of the world sharing a folder in a hard drive and editing in real time.
Wow.
He discovered that while doing that. So now his company is totally changed. So he kept an open mind
Yeah.
and said, okay, this is not, I don't want the cloud storage business with like automatic translations or transcription, all this new AI related stuff that you can do now. He went, everybody is sort of doing the same. He found this niche, and then he's going full on with that idea. So yeah, so that brings us back to the point of like just keep an open mind, and as a company owner or as an entrepreneur or somebody who's starting, I think we have to keep an ear on the ground all the time, because the ground changes fast.
So much. And I think keep your ear on the ground and your antennas high as well, so that then you're also able to capture anything that is moving around. Now, I think there's been a real focus on storytelling today, especially with, the new technology like social media as an example. So nowadays people consume content in like 10 seconds, and that's it. And I mean, if you don't sort of keep me glued and sort of like interested in the first 10 seconds, you've lost me. But in most cases, you can't tell a full story in just seconds, right? So you want to shoot a whole documentary. But again, the audience that is consuming it sort of is drifting towards more shorter form videos and all that, and clickbait content and all that. As founders, and probably as someone also, not just a founder, but a storyteller who is definitely also documenting such stories, and definitely for you to bring out the reality of the lived experiences of people, you definitely have to go deeper than the few seconds. How do you find that balance of sort of bringing out a story that someone would want to watch to the very end, but also just carries the weight of the matter without sort of just washing it away with shorter form videos?
Right, I think it's a good question. I can't find the balance yet. I have to be totally honest. I don't think I can tell a story in 10 seconds or 30 seconds. I think I would be doing a disservice to the people who gave me dedicated time and gave me time to spend a week, 3 days, 4 days with them. And so for me as a filmmaker, it's a challenge to reduce a half an hour story to 30 seconds or to maybe less than a minute to meet social media requirements. I think it can be done, and it could be really great for, and we've done it, great for to get people hooked onto the story, maybe to serialize it. You can probably serialize your if you're doing, I don't know, if we, for the secondhand clothes documentary, we put it together in a way that you can take out sequences, and the sequences make up, of course, the documentary, and we can probably release the documentary like that. Yes, but it's really a challenge. I think learning takes time. We've confused right now learning with having pleasure points activated in our brain. So those 10 seconds are of topics that we find funny, that we find interesting, objects, gear, stuff that we want to buy, stuff that we want to see, places that we want to go to. We can see that our brain can get activated for 10 seconds, 15, 20 seconds. But actual learning takes time. Actual learning takes what do you call it? The act of pausing and digesting
And
the information.
and
Exactly, reflection, meditation. It takes this epiphany. We can even call it epiphany when we understand. Oh, the penny dropped. Now I understand why this is happening, and we cannot get that from an overstimulated brain. You need to just step back and digest, and honestly, I think, and I'm probably part of the reason why I'm probably one of the problems. we're overloaded with stories. And to be honest, if you think about the stories that really matter to us as human beings, individuals, we can count them with our hands. The rest is just noise.
Yeah.
So these are foundation stories. These are value stories, stories that can make us better human beings, stories that can open our arms, open our mindset to other cultures, to other people's ideas that actually shake up our own foundations. And I think being uncomfortable, which is part of the social media part. If you look at social media, we barely ever are uncomfortable unless you're subscribed to certain news sites or news accounts, and then you're, oh, this is so terrible. You know, somebody just killed a pet, and that's bad. But other than that, usually we're not we just have these pleasure points activated, and even including stuff that is negative, like a war somewhere.
Yeah.
We know, like, okay, this confirms my own thoughts about this party, right? And it's usually 2 or 3 parties involved, and so I think maybe I have maybe nothing against social media. I think it's the present and the future, but I think when it comes to learning and really learning, it's not there. It's there to catch your attention, to be intrigued, for you to be intrigued, and that's the first phase. It's your work even as a teacher. Your work is to intrigue someone, so that person can go on their own, and get a little deeper. It's just that, I think.
And as someone who is also building AI platforms, I think I feel also guilty for what you're describing, because I think we call it the age of the algorithm, right? Where based on how much we know about you, we can get you to a level where you're really always stimulated when you get to my platform, because we want to get your attention. Of course, we want you to stay glued, spend more time on this particular platform. But it's true that the essence of you coming there does not necessarily matter at that point. And if it's you came to learn, it doesn't necessarily matter. You came maybe to be, to get information. It doesn't matter at that level, because at that level, it's what are you looking like you spending more time on. And of course, you'll probably spend more time on content that feels like resonates with you. And then we keep pushing that on you. And that's why we've seen cases where, like, some social media algorithms that keep pushing a certain narrative to a certain group of people. And those people get to a level where they don't actually know what reality feels like, because they are just so polarized to a level where that's their new reality, which could be just totally different from how the real world works. And I think for me, I'm feeling really hopeful that storytellers like yourself are still there to tell the real stories, because I feel like there's still room for the real stories of, if it's real. And I remember you and I, of course, did a shoot together. And when we were preparing for that shoot, you mentioned something that really caught me. You said, I think I've seen several use cases of AI out there in the world, but I'm really looking for those that have real impact, making real differences in people's lives and actually causing system change and all that. And that has to go beyond just a tool that excites me or a tool that gets teenagers hooked. You have to think beyond how does the system work in this area, and how can this AI tool or social media tool that I'm creating do more than just get people hooked, but actually make a real difference, change people's lives altogether. And I think that is where the sweet spot is, but very many people sort of fear getting, or maybe just way too difficult to get to that level. But I think we have to make peace with the fact that someone has to do that, right?
Yes, that's correct. I think the challenge that we human beings have is that we think that we can solve things with technology. And technology, of course, can help in tons of ways. But when it comes to real impact in our lives, it comes from within. It comes from a concerted, like a huge concerted effort, as a group of humans working together towards the goal. So I think in your case, from what I've seen in your company, I think you're solving very concrete need here. And I was just thinking about it the other day. Of course, you need usually where I'm based, like companies are more digitally savvy. Your the bidding systems are actually very public, and they need to be very public, even though there's corruption, of course, because we are human beings, and a lot of Europeans like to, come here and lecture, but we have the same problems.
Happens everywhere.
We have the same problems. We have corruption. We have people trying to avoid paying taxes. It's very human, but the societies usually over there have been able to set up some certain standards, and every now and then, of course, they're violated, and there's a scandal like corruption, and you go to trial, blah blah blah. But here, it's very very important for people to access better contracts, and then they need this digital onboarding, because usually the companies that you work with are small business owner.
That's true.
And so you're solving a real need here with AI, and I think that's one of the cool applications that this technology in concrete can have for small business owners, that they might not see it right now, but once they start getting their contracts and accessing new clients, they say, okay, so this, Elliot's company wasn't too bad at all.
That's true, and I hope, of course, that's the future where we definitely everyone wins and everyone is happy. That's what you're trying to get to. And I think there's been also storytelling in itself is definitely beyond being an art. It's a tool, right? Yes. And I think, I mean, you've had the privilege of working with different people. I think people, MSMEs, like I think the second-hand business that you talked about in Uganda, of course, this side we're building AI business, and I think in other parts of the world, others really focused on like drinks, beverages, and all that. But I think as founders, we sometimes ask ourselves, which story should I tell about my business? And I think that's a question that we continuously grapple with, because we are continuously told in today's age, you need to tell more stories about your business and about your work, because that's the only way you'll find people to collaborate with, people to support you, people to hopefully fund you and all that. But I think then the question that goes mostly unanswered is, what kind of stories should I tell more? And is this more of, well, what my audience wants to listen to, and whoever that audience will be? Or is it more around what I feel is, so is it more focused on me as the creator of the story?
Right.
Or more around the end consumer, the audience? I think,
I think it depends on I think it depends on who you are and where you want to place your focus on. I think it's some CEOs, some company owners are very happy to be being in the spotlight, and to for better and worse, right? And other people just focus on their companies. I think as a company owner, I would try to focus on what's been the best impact of my business, and also not shy away from mistakes. So I think people, you gain more trust when you accept where you failed, and so we tend to live on this Instagram life of rosy everything, right?
Everything is fine.
Everything is fine and dandy and cool, and there's music and happy drinks and fruit. but
Yeah.
but I think if you also come out as honestly about your failures as a person, as a CEO, as a company owner, and you don't have to do like a mea culpa about it. You don't have to like treat yourself too hard,
Yeah.
but you also have to accept your mistakes.
Yeah.
If you're building a brand, you have to like make it the center of it. But every now and then you can say, okay, so we didn't achieve these goals, and it was probably because of that. Should that be part of our storytelling? I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. But I think I would focus the a company's story on the impact. In fact, even a company like Apple
Yeah.
is it's probably one of the biggest companies in the world.
Yeah.
They don't focus on how many iPhones they've sold or computers.
Yeah.
They focus on usually on what's been the impact of the Apple Watch
Yeah.
and how many lives
That's
it's
what they'll
saved.
tell you for
and
sure.
then you have all these like why? Because those stories resonate with us. We don't usually, unless you're a real nerd, care how many gigabytes or terabytes your hard drive has, and you resonate with how your lifestyle, you will be accepted in a social group. In I don't know, in a company like yours, is you would be focused on the impact stories that you've had on different business owners that could say, okay, I use this platform, it helped me get this contract, and I have doubled my production, or Innovate helped me create my website, and I've been able to reach new clients in Tanzania. That sort of thing, and then also what's not worked, because of course you want to get more clients, but there's a reality. Then I think not you in particular, but in general, we try to not oversell the dream, and bring a little bit more. Otherwise, you just you're selling smoke.
Yes.
Right. So I think not overselling too much without taking away your passion and the enthusiasm that you have to be able to convey in telling your story.
You know what? Every founder I've spoken to, they will usually say, I started this business to change the world. And of course, different people are doing it in different ways. But I think that should always be the foundation, that are you making a difference in people's, because every business you can think of has a human element to it. Either they're customers or some stakeholder somewhere is definitely human. So how much of difference are you making in those people's lives, I think should be at the core. And I think, and to your point, that's why the big companies are so good at doing that. They communicate that how much difference have they made in people's lives. And I think that should be of definitely good attention. I mean, there should be good focus on that. But I think on the other hand, and I previously worked with the ITC in Kenya, and actually was running some sessions with young entrepreneurs. And we had these sessions called, we organized these sessions called Failure Talks, where I think building in Africa is, and I can tell you this, the entrepreneurship space is still very young. So most of the founders are like first generation founders. They haven't built businesses before. There's actually no mentors for them as well. Their parents probably were just public officials and all that. And so many guys are failing. And actually the startup failure rate, I'll tell you, in Africa is 90%. So there's only 1 out of 10 chances that you'll succeed when you start a business in Africa. The failure rate is that high. So we actually have more failure stories out there than success stories. But again, when you're telling a story, you don't want to tell a failure story, right? Because I think there's always a happy ending. I think that's what we are sold. And I think from Hollywood movies, that there always must be a happy ending to the story that is being told. And I think I see that real pressure for people to be like, well, I can't tell my story because it hasn't done that plot twist, right? Where I started with nothing and now I have something. So people are waiting for that moment when now I have something, for them not to start telling the story. I don't know, what will your advice be to, I think, people who feel like they don't have enough successes to share? Do you think failures are good to share or maybe
Oh
not?
my God,
Yeah.
my life is built up out of failures. No. But maybe I tell the story of my failures in a funny way, and I make myself the hero. But I I don't know. When it comes to failing, I mean, everyone's path is different,
That's true.
and if you have the right backup, or you have you come from a wealthier background, then the path maybe could be more linear. But if you have to find your own resources, find your own way, then zigzagging
It's
is
messy.
okay.
Yeah, it's very
Zigzagging
messy.
is okay as long as you have your objective and you want to go where you want to go. But reaching there might take different paths, and usually none of them are shortcuts. Usually it's very very hard, and of course there are people that can help you. There are foundations, there are other companies that can help you. There are other people that can swallow you up, and that's also part of life. Then you can just get out again and do your own thing. You have to partner with people until you can do your own thing. There's so many ways you can do, and it's okay to fail. It's really okay to fail. Um, when it's not okay to fail is when you have to, it's sort of like a life or death situation. Then failure, it's more complicated
Of
because
course.
you need to
You need to survive.
you need to survive. Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, failing is fine. We shouldn't be embarrassed. I think it's like when you get your heart broken, it's the same.
Pick
Yeah,
yourself up.
yes, we move on. We keep growing. I don't know if growth is the right word, but it's the years pass and you're still around and you still can crack up a smile and
That's true.
move on. I think you haven't failed. You just
100%. Say life goes on. I think the famous saying "what doesn't kill you makes you strong." I think definitely applies there. If you survive through, then you definitely come out on the other side much stronger, better lessons, and definitely better ways to build. This has been a great conversation, Armando. I can tell
thank you
you
for
that.
having me.
Yes, But before we close, we usually have one standard question that we usually ask, and this is specifically in your space. So we ask again. You get to choose between telling us what would you like to see more, or what do you like to see less in your space. So for you now, you're in the storytelling space. And generally speaking, again, looking at the people stories you've shot, or the people you've interacted with, what would you hope to see more of in storytelling? Or maybe if you choose what the pessimistic side, then what would you like to see less of in the storytelling space?
Um, I think I would like to see less. Actually, I'm not gonna go for on the negative on the negative path. I'll
Okay.
go on the optimistic path.
Okay.
I like to see more stories of local people, like local stories, and especially I would like to see more stories of um, places and regions that don't usually make it onto the spotlight. And of course there are many reasons why that happens, and it's always like a power structure around it. I was last week talking to a local filmmaker who was telling me, oh, I have this documentary idea, and he explained the idea, and then he said, like, I need $300,000 to make this, and my first reaction was, okay, so that's a considerable budget.
Yeah, that's on the high side,
And
man.
yes, and I asked them, okay, so who cares about this story? Who's your target? And his target were people from Kenya and people from Oman. And I said, okay, but if that's your target, then maybe the budget needs to be reconsidered because it's a very local story that local people are interested in. I don't want to dash or squash your hopes or anything like that. But maybe there's a way to tell this story that that doesn't require such a large budget, and I strongly believe in telling the story, getting it done. Whether you have a large budget or a small budget, but getting the story done. But that's my point of view. That's super personal. So I like to see maybe from my side of the world, people getting their films done without maybe complaining too much about this and that, and just getting busy. At the end of the day, if you want to tell a story and you want to make a film or you want to create your company, if you really want to do it, you will do it. You will do it. Whether you have wins in your favors or headwinds, it's human nature. We believe in something and we get it done. So I don't think I answered your question, but
you did, and I think that's so relevant, especially for anyone building anything in Africa, whether you're founding a business, doing film, or whatever you're creating. You always have to remember you start with the resources are always limited, but start with what you have. Start with what is readily available there. If you haven't started because you think someone from somewhere will come and fund you or inspire you to get started, I don't think you'll get that done. So think around your environment next to you. Who can help you? Talk to them, let them help you. If it's about fundraising, because I see most people who want to start say, I want to fundraise this much fast before I can do this project. But I'm like, you don't necessarily need money to start some of these projects. You can borrow something. You can go borrow some space and do the workshop and maybe get people hooked. So I think really thinking around what you can do within your own local area, the resource you can leverage to build something is so important and so relevant, because most people don't start with anything, but you start anyway and get it somewhere. And now much later, when now people start saying, okay, so there's actually something happening here, you'll see them now naturally coming to be like, okay, now we're paying attention, let's support you. But I feel like just in that initial phase of starting, you may actually to really think within and just make use of the available resources you can find.
That's true.
Yeah,
Yes.
100%. Thank you so much, Armando. Thank you for creating time.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, really enjoyed the conversation with you. And of course, you can always catch us on this podcast, but also, of course, there are many other episodes that came before this, so feel free to also watch those. You'll be definitely listening to other ecosystem enablers, like I said, from storytellers to researchers to investors and other founders building different things within the African continent. So thank you so much for being with us, and see you again in the next episode.
Hey, thanks.